Welcome to Inside the Noise by Guitarcenter, where we interview the artists, the leaders, and the innovators in the music industry. I'm Gabe Dalporto, CEO of Guitarcenter. Let's go inside the noise.
Hello, everybody. Gabe Dalporto here. Thanks for joining us. Today, I'm with Marcus Ryle. Marcus is legendary in the musical instruments industry. He's really gone through and changed the entire industry 3 separate times in 3 different eras. Started off working in synthesizers, and he really revolutionized the sound in synthesizers and got adopted by Eddie Van Halen, by Prince and others. So he really shaped the modern sound of synthesizers. He then went on in Fast Forward Designs, a company he co-founded, and worked on a ton of really innovative projects, but probably the most impactful was the creation of ADAT. So this really empowered an economical solution for everyday recording studios and really democratized recording. And then the third phase was founding Line 6. And if you're like me, and I've used Line 6 products, they're amazing. He created the entire modeling category. And we are very close to another major release by Line 6, and he's no longer there, but the company is very vibrant and lives on beyond him. So he's really changed the industry 3 different times, and now is just an industry luminary, and we get to speak with him and really get underneath some of these stories of how this happened and pick his brain a little bit. So thanks for joining us. Marcus, thanks for being here.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Boy, what a career. Tell me, as a youngster, as you're just getting started out, how did you find yourself here? How did you kind of drill in on that passion, and when did you kind of realize you had something special?
Well, I feel really fortunate. I had 2 great encouraging parents, and as luck would have it, my mom's family was very musical. My dad's family and his background, he was very technical. Mm-hmm. He was practically, literally a rocket scientist. He worked on the computer systems of the Saturn V rockets for the Apollo missions.
Wow, I'm a nuclear engineer.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Okay, so you see, bringing these 2 worlds together. I started with classical piano. I just had a great love for music, and when I was probably 9 or 10 years old, my dad brought home a record. It was actually by Dick Hyman, just called Moog. It just said Moog at the top. And it was a synthesizer record in the same era as Switched on Bach, by Wendy Carlos, which I got right afterwards. And I was just at a young age, I was just completely enthralled with these new sounds that I'd never heard before and that no one had really heard before. That got popularized in that era in the 60s. And I had a natural love of music and technology, and was determined at that point that I had to get a synthesizer, which I saved up and bought my first one when I was 12.
Wow.
And an ARP Odyssey, and started playing in bands, and just really enjoyed starting to take things apart and wanting to understand how they worked. So I never actually imagined it as a career. It was, at that stage, I was convinced I was going to be a rock star, as most young musicians were, wanted to be the next Keith Emerson or something. Through a series of events, I met Tom Oberheim just after I'd turned 19, and he offered me a job. And so, synthesizer company. Of course, the hardest part as a musician right then was...
So you were 19 and he hired you at 19?
Yes.
What did he see in you?
You'd have to ask him. Tom's a wonderful man, and he's been very kind in his description of it. But I love that he takes pride in he saw some sort of spark. He saw how he described it at the time, because I wasn't a degreed engineer. Mm-hmm. I had some smarts. I was self-taught, but he described it that even though Oberheim was a small company, they had a common problem where they had great engineers, they had marketing and salespeople, but they felt like these 2 groups of people just didn't know how to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. It's not uncommon, right?
Very common.
A musician, in fact, will just say, I want a product that does X, but how someone who uses something might describe what they want isn't always in the language of or well understood by someone who's an engineer. Oh. And what Tom saw in me was I was just kind of both built into one. And he described that my first job was bridge this gap, and I just kind of discovered early on that was my superpower. Its motivation was very selfish initially, which is I was a musician. There's products I wanted. There's things that the products available didn't do, and so when you're only kind of arguing with yourself about what feature to add or how expensive something might be, but why it's important, right? It becomes very efficient. So I was very lucky that he saw something in me. And I was going to say the hardest decision for me at that time was, do I actually want a real job? Because as a musician lifestyle, and I was playing in bands with my girlfriend at the time, now wife, and we've been doing music and bands and companies for all that time since the 70s, and it's a big crossroads, to take a real job, to take a 9-to-5 job. But so I had one important question for Tom, which was, so if I work there, can I get an OBX, which was in 1980, that was the flagship synth, which cost about, I think it was, I'm going to get the number wrong. It was quite expensive. I think around $4,000.
Back then?
Yeah, in 1980.
Wow.
Right? So it was like, this was unobtainium.
Yeah.
There was no way I was going to afford one. And so I'm thinking, and I'm gigging him, it's like, that would be a dream, right? To have something like that. And he's like, well, we could kind of give you one on permanent loan. So I said, all right, I'll take the job.
It's funny you started off saying you were taking equipment apart just to see how it works. And I'm a big podcast buff, and I listen to a lot of podcasts about founders. And Michael Dell, same thing. He would just take apart these IBMs and it's like, well, why is this so expensive? And he would cost out all the components. It's like, wow, I could build this for a lot cheaper. Yeah. Maybe I should make a company out of this. And Steve Jobs and Wozniak, and they started taking these things apart. Right. And I feel like there's just something amazing that you get a more tangible feel of it becomes less black box and more understandable.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my case, I don't know if those guys experience this, but understanding the technology became a necessity, because one of the times I took my ARP Odyssey apart, I'm trying to understand it, and I put it back together and it didn't work.
Oh.
Right? So now it's like, all right, I've already put my life savings into this. I bought it used and it was $600. Used at that point. The synth has only been available for a couple of years. Yeah. But, it was a lot of money. And I'm like, well, now if it's broken, now it's worthless. So, that's a great motivator when you're a kid to, 13 at that point or something, and that you got to figure out how this works. I was lucky. My dad was really, really helpful in, I could bring technical questions for him, and back then you couldn't just, you couldn't Google it or ask AI to fix it for you. So it was a great education, but one of necessity.
So tell me about what was maybe the first major innovative product you developed, and what was the genesis?
Well, every great innovation is really just built on something before. So I feel like everything I've been involved in owes a huge amount to what was before. And of course, this OBX had already been designed. Tom Oberheim and Jim Cooper were the principal engineers. This is an amazing instrument. This is the very early days of microprocessors. So these were some of the earliest musical instruments that had a microprocessor, a Z80. And it was on the heels of Dave Smith's Prophet 5, which was the first. That's really the landmark. Dave Smith really revolutionized that era. Though worth noting, Dave Rossum, who's a genius, founder of EMU, he was technically the first to use a microprocessor in a keyboard. But so the OBX was out, and they'd already started working on what became the OBXA, which was just like the natural progressor. The OBX could be up to 8 voices of analog synthesizer. Digitally, the processor was just digitally controlling the analog synthesizer. And the OBXA was going to, I should say, they could make one sound at a time. You had up to 8 notes you could play, but it was you call it a string sound, it's all strings. The OBXA, its main innovation, just was a new concept at the time, was that you could split 2 sets of 4 voices and have a split keyboard. So you could have any sound you want in your left hand and a different sound in your right hand. And so they had that basic concept, and it was a good education for me because the first thing I was doing was being a gigging musician. It's like, here's just this huge list of things I need the synthesizer to do. If you're gonna have a split keyboard, I gotta transpose each side, because sometimes you might wanna do a string pad with your left hand, so I don't want it in lower octaves. I need to go up, or things like that. I need the pitch bend to be selectable per side, and I need to be able to move the split point, and things that weren't really considered at the time. They added some complexity. There's some aspects of the design that I look back now and cringe a little, because I didn't know yet the ramifications of some of the things that I might be trying to put in. But the instrument turned out great. It's the instrument I got to show to Eddie Van Halen, and that's what led to Jump. So that was.
Everybody will remember that song for hundreds of years.
That was pretty amazing. And he did that all on his own. It's just kind of funny to think, it's like, showed him the synth and didn't know if anything would ever come of that, and then until the song came out, right? Mm-hmm. And it was huge. And of course,
did you instantly recognize it?
Oh yeah, and from the first note, you just knew exactly what that was. And
how
of course,
did that feel? Like when you heard that?
It was amazing, and it became probably the most expensive commercial Oberheim could ever make, because that was in the MTV era. And if you remember the video of Jump, especially when Eddie plays his solo, it said Oberheim right above the keyboard on the right side. So he's playing his solo, and
did your sales
on the screen
take off?
Every day? Oh yeah, it was. We went from being a synthesizer company that was doing very well, but we were known, people knew of folks like Herbie Hancock and Joe Zawinul and Lyle Mays and all kinds of folks that used Oberheim that were keyboard players. Yeah. And suddenly it's like, no, it's this guitar player who was, a supernova who really, for many people, put Oberheim on the map. So it was pretty fun.
So tell me, that must have been such an exciting time.
Yeah.
You then go on to found a company. That must have taken some real gumption.
It's funny. Looking back on a 45-year career, you imagine like it was this whole planned series of events. But as I'm sure you know very well, it's all about just taking action when circumstances arise. So it was 1985. I'm 24.
You're still a baby.
It's still a baby, yeah. But I felt like, I'd had 5 years of school at Oberheim, which was amazing education. And Oberheim, they'd been doing quite well, but at the same time, they were in a classic phase where, an entrepreneurial run company that's gotten to a certain size, and there's transitions that have to happen in how you manage it. And they would get, there was, inventory had built up a bit much, and there was some financial concerns. And I got a little nervous about where things were going. I didn't realize, again, looking back, Oberheim filed for bankruptcy 5 weeks after I quit.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know it was that imminent. I didn't have any insider information. But, I was making money in sessions, doing a lot of recording sessions, playing in bands. We didn't have any kids yet. We didn't have a lot of financial baggage, I guess, expenses. So, talked it over with Sue, my wife, and it just seemed like time to move on. And I actually had no idea what I was going to do next. And then, as it turns out, literally, as soon as I left, I'm not even sure how he knew. Joffar and Woody Moran had started a distribution company in the U.S. called Europa Technologies. And that was at a time when, little companies, you could import products from Europe and stuff and be a little distributor. And they distributed brands like PPG, and they were working with a company called Dynacord, which is the brand that still exists. It's in Straubing, Germany, in Bavaria. mainly was a kind of a large, for Europe, a large PA company, sound reinforcement. But they'd started dabbling into musical instruments. And they wanted to make a digital drum set in 1985.
Right, in the early days.
And Joff and Woody had convinced them that that's not going to work unless they get some American influence. And somehow Joff and Woody found out the moment I quit, and they get me on the phone. They go, will you talk to these guys from Dynacord? They're in town. Let's go. So within a week of quitting, I'm talking with them, and they explain they want to make a digital drum machine. They ask, can I do that? And it's kind of like the Hollywood thing. I just said, sure. I'd never designed a pure digital product. The synthesizers were analog synths that were digitally controlled. The week after I quit, Michel Doidic, who was an engineer, French engineer I'd worked with for almost the entire 5 years, he joined only 6 months after I did at Oberheim. Brilliant engineer. And he decided to leave Oberheim as well. And I said, you want to do this together? So Michelle, myself, and Sue, who's handled through that company and all of Line 6, basically everything but the product design. The three of us started Fast Forward Designs to design a drum product for Dynacord. And 9 months later, we showed a digital drum set at the Frankfurt Fair in 1986. And
what was the first digital drum set?
Well, this was in the era that there were some analog drum sets. There was the Simmons brand, which you're familiar with, was doing stuff. There was the Syndrum. There were some analog synthesizer drum kits. So it wasn't like inventing it all from whole cloth. And Dynacord had made a thing they called the Percuter, which I always thought was like a classic name that a German company would come up with, right? But the Percuter was...
percussion percuter.
Right, percussion computer. Yeah. So they had done their own drum pads, and it was a fairly simple... It really was melding of drum technology, digital drum technology, which was really started by Roger Lynn in drum machines, as opposed to drum pads. The LM1, which came out in 1980. And then at Oberheim, we did the DMX in 1981, which was a digital drum machine, and the DX. So we knew how to do digital drums, but those were, I'll get in the weeds on the technology, but they were almost like, each individual drum sound was almost like its own digital sound generator. It would have an EPROMs for the digital recording, and a DAC and a filter, and when you do a trigger, it would just basically play back that one memory unit. So each drum sound was like on a separate card in the DMX. So with Dynacord, we set out to do something new where you could have a whole area of memory, and we actually added an option so you could sample your own sounds. So it was early on in sampling and so on, and the ability to have any sound be on any voice. And it was called the AD1 or ADD1, Advanced Digital Drums. They never did get any traction in the US. It's one of these obscure things that every once in a while shows up on eBay or something. But it was a great learning experience, and it put us in business because we were on the business side. If you're curious about business things, I guess I had the natural insight and intuition that I told Dynacord, number one, yes, we can do it, but we're a company starting out. We've got no capital. We've got no equipment. We've got no place. So I said, we will give you a list of all the equipment we need, and you can own it. But you're just lending it to us. And I told them we'll need to be paid X amount per month throughout the development, and we want a royalty on the product. And I'd say that's your guarantee that we're trying to make the very best product we can, because our upside is all based on the success of the product. And they said yes, and they ponied up about $60,000 for development equipment. So we had computers, we could lay out circuit boards, start writing software. Sue found us a little office. It was a little office above a boat repair place in Marina del Rey. We didn't need much space. It was, nice. And we just put our heads down, started working on this product.
That is such a true entrepreneurial way to think about it, right? It's like you have no money and you just find a way to bootstrap it.
Yeah. And so we bootstrapped it with none of our own money because we didn't really have money. So So it was like we were in the black from the very first month.
So different than like a venture-backed company today. We're like, oh, we got to start off with $10 million. And you started off with none, and you made a profitable company out of it. It's amazing.
It was, we didn't realize how great it was to be kind of forced into that, having that discipline, because you're really mindful of your spending. You get a big check from a VC, it's pretty easy to just
waste
have
it.
your burn just
got to throw a launch party.
right. But when you're really watching the money. And our goals were really simple. We weren't trying to build some empire. It was, we all just said, if we can make a decent living and we're doing what we love, which is music related products, it's like, that's all we could ask for, right? I
love that.
It was perfect. And that's how we got started in '85. And then I met Keith Barr and Russell Palmer probably December of '85. They were the founders of Alesis. And Keith Barr said he really wanted to do a drum machine and a sequencer. And he knew I'd been involved in the Oberheim. My first complete product I did myself at Oberheim was a digital sequencer in the day. It was before MIDI, right? So it was done in a very different way. So now, that was in '81. So now it's 1985. MIDI exists. And he asked if we could do a drum machine and sequencer. Of course, we said, sure. And that was we actually knew we could. But so working with Keith and Alan Zach there, we did the HR-16 and MMT-8. And I like to say that which I think those came out in 80, I guess it came out in 87, right? Because 86, 1987. And this was, the DMX, the Lindrum, the first drum machine was $5,500 in 1980.
Wow.
And Prince, anybody who's anybody bought one. You had to. It's like you hear that drum machine on so many amazing records. And then the DMX a year later, we thought we were making a big price breakthrough. It was only $2,800, but still $1981. So now we're in 1987. The HR-16, 16-bit drums, much more capable, much better sounding drum machine than any of those, was $500.
Wow.
So Alesis,
now anybody can afford it.
Yeah, the early days of Alesis, they really set the standard for making your true price performance breakthroughs. Mm-hmm. So that true democratization of music making. And the sequencer was only $300. So it was like you could buy a drum machine and a sequencer for and that was back then. Those were the retail prices, right? There wasn't MAP yet, so you could get it discounted from there. But that's $800 retail, and you could buy a synthesizer, a halfway decent synthesizer for, let's call it $1,000. So under $2,000, you kind of had a complete little MIDI production thing. Whereas the Oberheim system, which was really the first time a drum machine, sequencer, and synthesizer worked together before MIDI, was about $10,000 and very limited by today's standards. I mean, it allowed songs like Every Breath You Take and stuff to be written, which is pretty cool. But it was really pretty basic by today's standards. So Alesis taught us what it could mean to make products that everyone could use. That was a huge education. Because suddenly, a great month, we sold 100 like Oberheim OB8s a month. It was $4,000 synthesizer, so that's decent. But, Alesis could sell literally tens of thousands of units a month of things. And it was like, we didn't even know that there were so many people out there. You live in a world that exists because there are so many people out there that love making music, thank goodness. But it's like we just weren't aware. We were in a different kind of that kind of higher end bubble, and that really got us excited. That's what led to us having a big relationship with Alesis, doing 40 products with them, and that was.
Tell me about how the ADAT came about.
Keith Barr gets credit for making that happen. Keith's no longer with us. He was one of the smartest guys I ever met. He was a complex guy. Sometimes a challenging guy.
Most geniuses are.
That's true. I think that does happen a lot. But I kind of like to think one of the great lessons I learned from Keith was audacity. Because it wasn't like there was anyone in the music industry who wouldn't say, affordable digital multitrack, yeah, that's a good idea. But it's like, of course, it's like saying, build me a 1,000-mile range electric car for $100. Would someone buy that? Sure, yeah, of course. Now you got to go and do it. So, it wasn't like the idea was novel, but it was Keith who said, no, we should build a digital tape recorder. I'm like, sure, I want one of those, but I just can't imagine. It's like, we never designed a tape recorder before, We all got, I don't remember what it was called. There was a 3-volume set, this huge set of books all about magnetic recording. So we're all just start studying how magnetic.
You literally had to read a book.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah. We started studying about magnetic recording, and we started, it started from just anything. It's like, well, what kind of tape do we use? How would the format work? What would happen? And Keith was living in Taiwan at the time. I still have a big crate filled with the faxes that going back and forth between Keith and myself and others, because that's how you'd communicate back then.
Talk about another
right?
technology.
So he's living in Taiwan and he's working on a prototype, and he's thinking maybe we can use a VHS transport, and there'd be like, multi-pages of crazy ideas and stuff back and forth every day via fax machine.
Wow.
The Zoom of its day, right? That just kind of got the ball rolling, and we just said, well, we got to do this. And it was learning everything from, Reed-Solomon error correction to, even though we used a VHS transport, it was, the drum is at a different speed, the tape's at a different speed, it's new custom heads, new rotary transformer for the heads, everything to figure out how we're going to put this data on this tape and make it reliable and so on. And I've told this story before, but it's another great lesson in things. You're probably familiar with the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, which I was not familiar with at the time, but it's basically about how big companies can really get in trouble because they're so fixated on their bread and butter and what got them somewhere. Companies like Kodak.
I think about this all the time.
Yeah, it's a big problem. Companies that can't evolve.
Yeah.
But
because you're making too much money at the thing you do,
sure,
and you don't want to make something that disrupts that, and so you don't innovate, and then eventually someone else does it.
Someone else is going to do it. If you don't obsolete yourself, someone else is going to do it for you.
Amen.
So the thing is that I didn't understand that concept at all, but the entire time we're working on this tape recorder, I'm thinking, this is the greatest thing ever. This is the hardest project I've ever worked on, but I can't wait to have this. But the whole time I'm thinking, we're going to get slaughtered. Because there's no question, brilliant companies like Sony and TIAC and all these, they probably have this in their back pocket, and they're just waiting to launch it on the world. How is this little Santa Monica-based company that mainly was doing drum machines and reverbs is going to take over the world of tape recorders, right? That's the audacity of it. And I'm thinking, boy, I'm having a great time, but it's just not going to work. We're going to get killed. But of course, Sony's top-end multitrack tape recorder was like $250,000 to buy like a Sony 48-track recorder. It was in all the big studios, right? But I mean, that thinking isn't going to lead you to go, let's make a $4,000 tape recorder. Right? And you could buy multiples of ADAT. You could buy 6 of these and have a 48-track. That was one of the innovations of ADAT, that you could add up as many tracks as you wanted by just buying more machines. So 48 tracks of ADAT was $24,000, and 48 tracks of Sony was 10 times the price. So
what do you think? It was a huge revolution. What do you think the impact of that was?
I really do think it did usher in the true era of home recording. And it's not that home recording had existed forever. People recorded on Porta studios, cassette-based, 4 tracks, some real analog. It's just that everything you did at home, by definition, it's simply a demo. You'd never release that, right? You do the demo, you'd write this great song, and then you go into a real studio and you try your best to recreate the magic of your demo. I think ADAT is when people realized, wait a minute, now, finally, the tape quality, what I can capture is as good as the best studios. And
It's a huge revolution.
it was a big change. It also helped educate people into realizing what their next problem was, because you might have a great tape recorder, but it's like, oh boy, my mixer's real noisy. So Mackie, probably that's a brand that Greg Mackie would probably even say it was kind of, its huge rise was on the coattails of ADAT, because everyone needed new mixers because your mixers were bad. And then you realize, actually my room sounds terrible too. Right, and my microphones suck, and everything. It's like, yeah, before it was like the tape was the weakest link, and why everything kind of just didn't sound so good. So, but yeah, so it was a great time, and a lot of great records. You know, Alanis Morissette's first record. You know, what an amazing record, and
That
it's
was
like
spectacular.
all recorded on ADAT, and that was an amazing feeling as well. That the tools were getting used by these great musicians and artists, and it was having an impact.
Hey, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We've actually been really overwhelmed by the response so far, so thank you for that. We have also noticed that a lot of you haven't subscribed yet. We have incredible guests coming up. I'm not even allowed to tell you who they are, but trust me, you don't want to miss this, so hit subscribe. That way you don't miss an episode. Now back to the program.
So everything's going well.
Yeah.
Why line 6?
Yeah, it's a crazy idea, right? I guess it was just this timing, this moment in time. Part of it indirectly is kind of Alesis' fault. Alesis is still a great brand today, but as you know, it's different ownership than it was back then. And we'd done 40 products for Alesis. I mean,
Wow, 40 products.
The Quadraverb, the Quadrasynths, the keyboards, so reverbs, drum machines, keyboards, all the ADAT family. It was a fantastic relationship, and all these products were huge success. I mean, the SR60, the Alesis SR16, I designed that in 1990. You still sell that today, that product. It's probably one of the oldest technology products on the market. So really proud of all the stuff we did with Alesis. And we kind of got used to, like, any product idea we brought up, they're like, yeah, let's do it. And it was just going like gangbusters. And we saw that ADAT, I'd predicted that ADAT had at best a 10-year life. It was a transition.
Yeah, to computers.
It was ADAT, what really made ADAT the success it was, if you think about it in very clinical terms, you could record 40 minutes of audio on a VHS tape, 8 tracks. That VHS tape represented 2 gigabytes of storage for $10 in 1991. There was no storage medium, 10 gigabytes. So, you know, DigiDesign, now Avid, existed. Peter Gocher, a good friend who was on our board at Line 6, you know, he started that company with Evan Brooks. They'd started doing computer recording. There was Sound Tools, and Pro Tools was born right around the same time as ADAT. But you couldn't trust hard disks, and you had no way of backing them up, and they were really expensive. So computer recording couldn't hold a candle to ADAT then, but it was clear that was going to change. As soon as hard disks become reliable and affordable enough, everyone's going nonlinear. Tape will be dead. So we mapped out a collection of products for Alesis of how we thought they could transition to the full digital tapeless studio. And it was the first time that they said, no, I don't think we want to do that. Mm-hmm. And I went, uh-oh. So we were getting royalties on all these products. Frankly, we were about 11 people, 10 engineers, and Sue running the business side. And we were making millions of dollars a year in royalty revenue, which is great. Now it's like, well, now where do we go from here? What happens if our biggest client maybe doesn't want to do these products anymore? At the same time, I'd found a really affordable DSP chip out of TI Japan, because up to that point, all our DSP, we'd done custom chips, which Alesis could afford to bankroll, but our little company wouldn't be able to do that. So if we wanted to do future DSP, we needed something off the shelf. So I found this affordable DSP chip. I thought, this could be powerful. And it just kind of occurred to us that guitar players were the musicians really getting left behind, because now This is 1994 or so, and plugins are just starting to happen. Producers are able to do stuff. Keyboards have really evolved. You can get any sound at a touch of a button, and so on. And guitar players were spending all day with their gear trying to get one sound, and then dealing with all the hum and buzzes and problems of their setups and everything.
Hum.
And hum. I hated hum. I really hated hum.
You and me both.
So I just thought, what if, is there now enough DSP power where we could do a reasonable job of modeling the sounds of guitar amps and effects? So it really just started as an internal research project. At the time, we imagined we might have offered it to another brand or so on, but as it evolved, and Michel Douadic did a lot of the early research, and we started growing the team, getting more guitar players, because, true confession, I'm not a guitar player. I'm a bit of a bass player. I'm mainly a keyboard player, and most keyboard players are just frustrated guitar players. But I knew a lot about guitar sound and worked with a lot of guitarists, but we got some really great guitar players into the company, and just decided it's time. We've had 10 years, 5 years at Oberheim, 10 years of designing products for other companies with no financial risk, because we weren't manufacturing or warehousing or selling or servicing any of these products. We're just getting royalty, getting paid to develop and getting royalty, right?
That's a great business.
But we got a chance to learn from these other businesses of what went right and wrong. Oberheim going out of business, going bankrupt. Alesis, as it turns out, a few years later, filing for bankruptcy. We saw these things. We figured we'd like to be able to learn. We'd rather learn from other people's mistakes than make our own. So we thought we were ready, that we could take the risk of having inventory, building a product, building that whole infrastructure. And Line 6 was born January of 96. This January, it'll be 30 years. Holy smokes. Oh. 30 years since our first NAMM show, January of 1996, where Line 6 was launched.
Tell me about that first show.
That first show was great. Back then, Hall E in Anaheim was really known, the basement there. That was known as just like the mad scientists world. Little startups, quirky companies, some really strange things you'd find. And the big question was always like, which companies might break out of Hall E? So we had our little booth in Hall E, and Brian Majeski wrote a lovely article in Music Trades at that first show saying, if there's a company that I think is going to break out of Hall E, it's going to be Line 6.
Your first NAMM.
Our very first NAMM show. Wow. We showed, it was called the Access 212. We made a 212 guitar amp. And if you look at it, I fully accept, guilty as charged, the observation people make that it looks like a guitar amp designed by a keyboard player. Because you had to have a lot of parameters, so it's kind of a matrix of parameters. But it is a guitar amp. It's wood box wrapped in vinyl, 212-inch speakers. It was $1,000, but it had real, amp modelings. In fact, you could get an optional foot pedal and push a button and get any sound. And we were demoing the whole time. We had a good parade of folks, people interested, and thought maybe we.
What could that thing do?
Here.
That first amp, like what?
It's we weren't as in that very first generation. I think we had the insight to know we weren't going to be able to say this is exactly like a specific amp that was being modeled. Mm-hmm. But we knew what the kind of the main food groups that we needed to get. You needed to get a great tweed sound and a Class A and your British distortion and so on. And we had a good amount of experience with effects, so there was a lot of good effects in there. Mm-hmm. All the chorus and flange and delay and reverbs and distortion boxes and
really
so on.
Pretty flexible.
Yeah, so it was really kind of trying to be the whole signal path. You plug your guitar into there, and you're good to go. And fortunately, there's so many guitar players out there that the number of early adopters willing to embrace this new approach were significant enough that very quickly we had thousands of units on back order. And certainly didn't know what we were doing when it comes to the guitar market, coming from all technology products. But this really took off, and you mentioned venture capital earlier. Thanks to the advice of Peter Gocher, who called me up and wanted to buy one of these amps. He said, have you ever considered raising some venture money? Because as a founder of Digidesign, he raised venture money and then went public and then sold to Avid and so on. So he had a very successful career doing that, and he taught us about venture money, and we decided to go that route.
So who'd you raise from?
We Sutter Hill.
Okay.
We went and pitched 3 venture firms: Sutter Hill, August, and IVP. I'm really testing my memory. And I'll tell you, it was so fun going up to Northern California and bringing a guitar amp into these venture capitalist boardrooms.
Wow, they had never seen anything like that.
And playing for them. I brought it was Greg Westall, great guitar player, was with Line 6 for a long time. He and I'd go up there, and we had this whole pitch, and then start playing some Led Zeppelin and some Jimi Hendrix and all of these classics, and playing the song and nailing these sounds and explaining that. And of course, then explaining, here's how many guitar players there are and so on. Probably most importantly, being able to say, and here are the products we designed for other companies that have generated over $500 million of revenue. The number one drum machine, the number one tape recorder, the number one synthesizer, the number one. So we had a track record, number one. Number two, we weren't pitching an idea, we were pitching a product that was done.
Yeah.
And we've got thousands of units on back order, and we don't need to raise money. That business advice is probably the hardest for most people to swallow. It feels like such a paradox, right? But it was the truth. Having all those back orders, right? We knew we could bootstrap it, which is how most companies did it. And if you're raising money when you're desperate, that becomes a real challenge, and you're going to have to give away the farm, right?
Yeah, raise money when you don't.
When you're raising
need it.
money, going, we can just do this ourselves. But if we did raise money, we think we could really accelerate it. We had an acceleration plan, and so all 3 venture firms wanted to do the deal, which was an amazing.
3 out of 3?
Yeah, 3 out of 3.
Wow.
They were all into it, and so now
You realize that's very unusual.
Well, I didn't realize anything. It was 1990, late 96, early 97, and I didn't have that type of business experience, but and it wasn't giant dollars, right? At that time, we raised $3.1 million for about 20% of the company.
Okay,
so we didn't have to give up control. We got a nice cash influx to buy inventory and accelerate things. But most importantly, we got to pick the venture partner that we thought, because it was much more than money, who could be a great advisor for us. We had Len Baker from Sutter Hill on our board for decades, and he was a brilliant mentor and really tough on us in the right ways, as was Peter. And having a board that had such great business experience was also a great education and really helpful for how to grow the company.
Were there any times when you wish you hadn't taken money?
On balance, no. Were there times that it was frustrating? Were there times we'd have disagreements at a board level? Absolutely. There's no question about that. But I think it's like any conflict resolution strategy. If you recognize, if fundamentally you're dealing with decent human beings, right? I mean, all bets are off if you got psychopaths or you got people who are just greedy and corrupt and so on. But if fundamentally, I mean, it's like, why are they there? Why'd they invest? They would like a return on their investment. That's fair.
Yeah.
If the company grows and is much more successful, we all win. That's right. So they just might have a different perspective of how we get there. But if you go back to, well, we're aligned on the same goals, right? So let's just kind of work through the differences. I mean,
did you ever feel pressure because sometimes venture capital can push you into trying to grow unnaturally fast, spend money faster than you normally would? Did you ever feel? I
think when we did a second round in 2000, I felt that a little more then. But I would say the difference is that. I should mention a key thing is that Sutter Hill was not the kind of venture capitalist that expects to flip their money real fast. I mean, they invested in 1997. They didn't get paid till 2014.
That's incredible.
And they never said you got to sell the company. Their position, and Len was very clear. It was such great basic principles. As long as the company is continuing to increase in value and it's doing the right things, at some point there'll be an intersection. At some point there'll be that moment of liquidity, right? Go public or be acquired or whatever. And so they made their profit in 2014, along with everyone else. And that was never the plan. I mean, when we first did it, we thought, oh, sure, maybe 5 years we'll do an IPO and before no time we'll be off like a rocket ship. But there was never the pressure that happens when, maybe they've got other financial pressures with their other investments or whatever. There's kind of other factors where they have their own investors they've got to return to. Those factors we didn't have to deal with, so we're very lucky. It was just, are we doing good business or not?
So take us back. What was your first real blockbuster?
At Line 6?
Yeah.
So that first amp, that really got us off the ground. But in December of '98, we introduced the Pod.
Yeah.
That
hope everybody remembers
the Pod. That was the red kidney bean. That was a watershed moment because, and we had a feeling it would do well. But it's when I sometimes talk at schools or with other companies, being able to look back in hindsight, I feel like I'm able to see really clearly why the Pod was a success and what could be learned from it. I don't take credit that we knew at the time it would be as big as it was. I mean, now looking back, Line 6 has sold millions of pods and millions of guitar amps. That's mind-boggling,
Huge numbers.
Yeah.
So what was it about it?
So Pod, in hindsight,
what was the
I think there was several
demand
things. So first of all, it wasn't. Again, we were never first, and I hope I'm clear. Hopefully I'm saying we a lot because you realize that there's through every step from Oberheim all the way on. It's like I played my role, but there were tons of brilliant people working on all this stuff. Collaboration's my favorite thing, whether it's in music or technology or whatever. I'm not interested in just sitting there doing something by myself. But so all of us were discussing it. We'd only done 2 amps so far. We had the Alesis 212 and then the FlexTone, which was it was a little more affordable. And the FlexTone I designed, the Alesis 212 was a little too nerdy. The FlexTone, I thought, I just want to have, there's just a 16-step encoder. There's 16 amps. And there's another 16-step encoder, and there's 16 types of effects. And then there's drive, bass, mid, treble. You reverb them out. It's like, if you looked at the controls, at first glance, you're thinking, well, if I can run a twin reverb, I can run this amp. And you look and realize, oh, I got to select, what do I want, Brit blues or tweed or...
I love how you have these surreptitious names, but everybody knows what amp it
Yeah. We were careful. We were kind of pioneers in being right on the edge of trademarks and things like that. But we were always careful. We would use all the real trademarks on all our marketing with very clear disclaimers of who owns it and everything. It's kind of set the standard. I see the disclaimer that we did in the 90s, like in every company that does modeling. It's the same disclaimer from way back then. But on the product itself, obviously we wanted to be, just have description. If you were a guitar player, you said Class A, and it's like, okay, I know what that is, right? And tweed, things like that. It was kind of good fun having to come up with those names. So the FlexTone, pretty much anyone could use, but it was still a guitar amp. In hindsight, what I recognize is, with guitar amps, we were competing with a mindset. Mm-hmm. And we were actually asking guitar players to kind of change their religion, right? Digital and guitar in the 90s, those were 2 words that don't go together, right? Digital was considered a pretty bad thing in the guitar space. Everything was analog, everything was tubes. So, we're telling people you should give up your tube amp and buy a digital modeling amp. And now, at that time, thousands of people did. That's great. But if you think about it, Pod, we said, well, we're going to put modeling. It was the exact same controls as the FlexTone. 16 amp models, 16 effects. It basically was a FlexTone without the speaker and amp. Put in this funny kidney bean. So this FlexTone now is this box now you could just plug headphones into, or plug into your ADAT, or plug into your computer as computer recording was starting to take off, and just dial up a tone. And what's interesting is that didn't compete with anything from a philosophical or religious point of view from the guitar player's standpoint, right? I still could have my Marshall stack. I could still have all my analog tube, whatever. That's what I'm going to go gig with. But when I just want to play around or I want to record, wait a minute, I don't have to set up a microphone. I don't have to worry about how my room, I don't have to bother the neighbors. All this stuff of direct recording guitar. It was really the first digital product that did it well enough that people were like, okay, this is a thing. So yeah, so next thing we know it, we're selling thousands and thousands per month, and Jeff Beck is making a record with Pod, right? And Jimmy Page comes to me at a party and says, "Thank you for the Pod."
Wow.
And I'm like, I was trying to thank him for the music and all the inspiration, and it's like, so all these guys are like, yeah, of course I have a Pod. It's great, and that's when things really took off. So it was a great experience. We went from, I think we did like 3 million in sales and 9 million in sales, and then like 28 million in sales, and it kept going. We peaked at just over $100 million of revenue for Line 6. Yeah,
That's fantastic.
Pretty crazy times.
So then, at some point, someone came knocking.
Yeah.
And tell me about that.
Yamaha. I feel it's, again, so lucky because Yamaha is probably certainly in the top 5 of brands I revered since a child. Played tons of Yamaha. Incredible brand, incredible quality, incredible integrity, all of these things. It's like, that's pretty amazing. And as it turns out, we got approached. We would get approached almost every year. Someone's like, so is Line 6 for sale? And our answer was always the same. We're not for sale. We're just building our company, but but we could talk, if you want to or whatever. But in 2013, we got approached by a reputable company I can't name that they were just really seriously interested enough that the board said, maybe it's time we should at least be taking a look at this. And I said, well, if we're going to take a look at this, I really need to call up Yamaha. Because I knew some of the people at Yamaha. I knew one of the directors on the board. And I thought, just even as a courtesy and out of respect, I called this board member at Yamaha and I said, look, I'm not asking you to do anything. I just wanted to let you know, I wouldn't want you to be upset with us if you read in the trades 6 months from now, Line 6 has been sold to company X, and you had no idea that Line 6 was for sale. So if you're not interested, totally understand, but I just want to let you know. That was in, I think that was like in October of 2013. We had a signed deal by December.
Wow.
And closed, we had to wait 30 days for regulatory, closed in January. And again, I've been accused since I was a kid of having a charmed life. This feels like a charmed life thing. I'm sorry, I hope I don't upset anyone. What I didn't realize, Yamaha, they publicly would do their midterm plans. They'd publicly talk about it. They had put together, I think it was like a $350 million fund. They said they wanted to look more seriously in acquisitions. They wanted to make Yamaha more international and bring different types of innovation in. They even mentioned something about like in the guitar space they knew was something that was really important. So it was just completely the perfect timing. And of course, knowing that another company was seriously interested, they knew would have needed to move fast. So, they came in with the best price. It was my number one choice of company to work with. And it was a very clean and straightforward transaction. It closed literally the first day of the NAMM show of 2014. So that was a pretty special NAMM show. And I think as often happens in our industry, people worry about acquisitions. Oh, is the brand going to get ruined and so on? But I think Yamaha is one of the companies where people can look at, they own Steinberg, a great brand, and Bosendorfer and Nexo, and they are, they respect what these brands are and so on, and have been really good partners. So then I stayed on till 2019, it's about 5 years. Not because I had to, there were no golden handcuffs, but I really loved working with Yamaha and loved all the things we're working on. And we were working on Helix, which was
Tell me about Helix. That was a huge game changer.
Helix was...
When did it launch? What was your
probably
involvement?
My proudest moment, really. Again, an amazing team. And Eric Klein, who's still at Line 6, has really become the champion of everything Helix and just understands how to shepherd that product so well. It's still a great team at Line 6. But at the time, the brand... I think for me, I really recognized that although Line 6 was doing really well, we were at risk because we were a brand that was not, what's the right word? I don't know if we were, don't feel we were admired quite to the level that we would hope for and we would wanted the brand to earn. It's kind of like Line 6 is great for what it is, Sure, the modeling's okay, I mean, it certainly, it made its mark and everything, but it was like, but at that time, thankfully, really great companies came around making things like the Axe FX and the Kemper Profiler, and these companies kind of forced us to up our game and realize, no, now, I mean, there's companies that are making digital products where people are going, no, these are actually really good digital products. So it's like, okay, we need to just start from a clean slate. And it was,
so you had to,
it was like our fourth time of reinventing modeling.
You had to, disrupt yourselves.
Yeah.
So you actually learned how to solve the innovator's dilemma.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And we, sometimes to a fault. I mean, we tried to, there was a whole line of products where I believe, if I may say so, quite innovative, where we were going into live sound. That's where I also learned that you have to be really cautious about what brand permission you have. So these were very, I think, highly respected products, but we didn't really make a dent. So we were looking into other areas as well, but we needed to reinvent in guitar. And Helix took about 5 years of development. Amazing teams. I think the best testament, and what I'm so proud of the team doing in Line 6, is that a hardware platform can exist as being kind of the top-selling guitar multi-effects processor for 10 years with no changes in hardware.
Yeah.
That shows that I think we did a pretty good job of really planning to have tons of horsepower and capabilities.
So you overbuilt the processor, and
yeah, I'd say we overbuilt, but we knew we could release a really impressive product that only did a fraction of what would become possible, right? And so it launched,
vision.
and we launched so we were acquired in January 2014. We launched, I believe it was June of 2015, right? Because it was just 10 years. And then we announced the product about, not intentionally, it was about 3 or 4 months before we could ship. But in hindsight, that actually turned out to be a really good thing. Because we had plenty of great retail partners, for example, that were really nervous about Line 6 coming out with a $1,500 guitar processor. I mean, at that time, the most expensive pedal we made was $500, And very smart people, for very good reason, were saying, you get over $1,000, this is going to be a real problem. But we said, we can't build the product we want to build at $1,000. It's like, I mean, the best we could do was $1,500. We have to make the right product. And that, the whole team was so fully committed to that. That was something else that was special. It was like, even though, we had venture backing before, now we're owned by Yamaha, everyone understood, it's hard for a lot of people. My personal philosophy is money has to be secondary. You have to recognize what's really valuable for people, how to really make something meaningful. And the money is just the result of that. If you start out going, how do I make money? And then you're just trying to find out, like, well, just how do I make money? Oh, maybe I could fool someone into this, or I can shortcut that.
Never leads you to a good place.
I don't think so. I mean, Obviously some people have succeeded with that, but we realize...
If you start with, how do you delight people? You'll wind up in a great place.
We use that word. Are you familiar with the Kano model?
No.
It's great. The delight is a key to that. About putting into 3 buckets the main attributes of features and benefits that customers look for, and the delight attribute is critical. It's a exponential multiplier in your ultimate success if you truly can bring delight. And we would talk about delight all the time. So I'm glad you said that. And it was probably like the parallel. Like at Oberheim, we were just designing the very best things we could because that's all we knew how to do, and we were designing for ourselves. The ADAT is like, this is the tape recorder we all want, and it was like just committed to trying to make this amazing thing. And now in the Helix world, we're just like, this is so amazing. So many innovations being thought of how to use it, how to make it really easy to use, but so deep and so on. We just knew it was going to be really amazing. And during those 3 months or so before it shipped, when we announced it, started showing some videos, the groundswell was just unbelievable. And, great partners like Guitarcenter and others just saw the pre-orders that were happening was unbelievable. It took us, I don't even remember how long it took us before we could catch up on the backlog. I think it might have been more than a year.
Wow. It's a great problem.
I don't remember exactly. It was a great problem. And then what is key is the team. We never just rest on our laurels. The number of updates, what Helix can do today versus 10 years ago, it's mind-boggling. It's so many times more capabilities, so many more models, so many more types of effects and capabilities. It's crazy. And now, of course, I love Helix Stadium is coming out. I'm really proud of the team. I had, I can say it was a concept in the works even when I was there, because these things take a long time. But what the team has pulled off with that is spectacular, and I think we're going to see the same thing. That's going to be a platform that's going to live on for a long time. The
next 10 years.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Technology has changed so radically since you kind of started disassembling keyboards. Like anything is possible now. Where do you think, what are the next major innovations and movements in sound and music?
That's a big question. What's interesting is we're starting from a very different place, not just because of what's possible with technology, but because of this history. Music technology is not that old, right? It was innovation when Jimi Hendrix started using a wah pedal, right? There wasn't a lot of choices back then. So when you think about it, technology is not that old, but now it's created so much of the lexicon of the history of music of the last 60 years. And that foundation is influencing so much of what we do. So before I answer your broader question, it's kind of amazing to me that one of my big focuses right now is working again on analog synthesizers like I did back in the 80s, because there's something about the sound of those instruments that is so inspiring, not just because of what was possible, but because of now we've added to our own understanding of it based on the amazing music people made with it. Mm-hmm. Really, it's the musicians that make products great, not the products themselves, right? Because you hear what a creative person does with it. So now, Oberheim synthesizers, that's such an iconic sound. And we were able to bring the Oberheim brand back. Tom Oberheim, I still owe a lot of gratitude to, and he's 89 and still passionate about synthesizers. And we partnered up with the Sequential team, which is some amazing engineers, and it's a great team now, bringing those two, formerly competing brands together and making synthesizers that are the modern day equivalent of what made those great in the 80s. So this actual analog signal path of like an OBX8 is 100% analog, and it's 100% authentic to why those circuits sounded so great back then. But now with modern manufacturing techniques and lots of other capabilities that weren't possible then. So certainly one aspect of where things are going is identifying what was really great historically and bringing it into today. But from there, I think the possibilities with digital, with AI now and so on, they're very broad. I can understand it being kind of scary for some people. I think that what I'm hoping is we will still be able to focus on the magic of what a human does with any technology. That despite being a technologist, I like to think the technology doesn't really matter, right? It's what an artist does with it. And that I think part of what we marvel at, it's not just the song, it's that a human created it. Mm. I'm certainly not trying to be like anti-AI. I think AI is going to play a very important role in lots of things. But if fundamentally what we love about creativity is that a human did it, what we love about going to the theater is seeing real humans on a stage in front of us right now performing a work of art, right? Or going to a concert, certainly live music is never going to be replaced by AI if you're there because you actually want to see these people do what they do. What's happened is that some of the creative inspiration that came from our limitations, like Sgt. Pepper only having 4 tracks, or like things like that, you know, some great creativity comes from limitations. I only have one more track, or I only have one more voice of a synthesizer, or I only have, this is all I got to work with, right? That can really drive some amazing creativity. I think music making becoming unlimited is going to force us to think about creativity in new ways. Maybe we'll just have to self-impose our own limitations in order to create great music.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
It really is. Yeah. So I'm not sure where the future brings. I just guarantee you, there'll never be a shortage of new, exciting, innovative things that inspire musicians. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking me on that journey. It's so inspiring to just think and hear about all the innovations you've brought to music and continue to bring. You're still creating, which I love. So thank you for joining us. Everybody, Marcus was kind enough to spend a little time with us here today, and I personally feel like I learned a lot, and hopefully our audience had a good time too. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next episode. Thank you. Marcus Ryle, everybody. What a great conversation with a living legend in the music industry. To hear his story, how he started off with a musical mom and a rocket scientist dad, and he basically bridged the same thing in his life, which was technology and music, how that kind of followed him through his life. Went to college, dropped out to just start working and start building and start engineering. Then went on to invent the ADAT recording system, which really revolutionized recording and democratized recording. Started Line 6, one of the most iconic companies, music instrument companies in the world. Built the first pod, built all the modeling capabilities that we all take for granted today. Now he's continuing to push the frontiers of engineering with his own firm. It's just amazing to be able to sit down with someone who's had so many impacts over such a long period of time. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next week.